Well, good morning and welcome back from the holiday recess. We will have our caucus this morning, and again, our focus will continue to be about jobs and putting the country back to work. Frankly, and I know my colleague will have something to say about this, disappointed that the super committee could not come up with a plan that was big, that was bold, and clearly one that was balanced. And yet I still think, absent any super committee, that the focus on jobs is still something within the grasp of Congress. The National Journal, and you may have recalled me saying this past August, laid out plans before the President had laid out his full plan, endorsed by both parties, many bipartisan, that would put the country back to work. The one thing that hasn't changed throughout this whole fall discussion about the super committee is the need for Americans to go back to work. With more than 14 million Americans unemployed and 25 million Americans underemployed, it's time for Congress, who is at an all-time low in its ratings, to do the patriotic thing. Now, when I say the patriotic thing, what do I mean by that? When we look at veterans' unemployment, when we look at the only Americans who are making a sacrifice currently in this economy, it's the men and women who wear the uniform. National unemployment is at 9.1%. Veteran unemployment is at 12%. For people in this country 18 to 24 years of age, unemployment is at 15%. For veterans who are from age 18 to 24, unemployment is at 30%, up from 18%. The President had it right. Americans cannot wait for another election. We need to put the country back to work. We can do that with the jobs packages that we have before us, introduced by both parties, introduced in a bipartisan way, as was outlined in the National Journal. Certainly the Make It in America agenda that we have put forward on innovation and focusing on infrastructure is an area that we feel that we could accomplish. And you all know, because we've said this repeatedly, that job creation equals deficit reduction. In fact, the CBO has said that more than a third of the deficit could be reduced by taking unemployment from 9.1% to under 7%. And in the process, we'd be putting back the very people who have sacrificed on our behalf, who have been in the front lines for this country, back to work. It's a travesty, especially as we just come through a Thanksgiving Day holiday on our way to the Christmas holidays, to focus on what we need to do on behalf of Americans. Okay, the super committee didn't work. It no longer has the ability to deal with cloture or poison pill amendments. But can Congress as an institution come together in regular order in bills that for the most part have already been through a committee process, who have been vetted, have been heard, and come up and put the nation back to work? We think so. If not, Congress will continue down this path. Imagine the President in this time is also offering a tax cut break. Yes, tax cuts. But yet, even here, when it comes to tax cuts for the middle class, the Republicans have said, no. Only tax cuts for the nation's wealthiest 1%. The 99%ers, well, you have to continue on being more productive than you ever have at any other point in history, while you flatline in terms of your economic growth in future. And while there is no end in sight to the prosperity for the 1%ers, we're dealing with these kind of issues. We need to put this money back in their pockets. Mark Zandi has said that without this money, it could hurt this economy, the GDP, by 2%, which would be a further drag on the economy, clearly a further burden on the working middle class and this nation. And I guess the other side believes that's the formula to elect their president. They can't be the Grinch that stole Christmas unless they think being a Grinch will elect a Gingrich. And we are going to make sure that over the next several months that we continue to focus on putting this country back to work, doing what's fair on behalf of the American people, and reaching out to our colleagues on the other side and saying, bring up your bills. Bring the jobs bills to the floor of the House of Representatives. And let's have an agreement amongst us without any super committee to vote them up or down. Jobs for the American people. Jobs for veterans. 18 to 24 years old, returning vets, people who have served the nation, 30% of them out of work. Come on. Put the country back to work. That's where our focus is going to continue to be. Put the country back to work. Give the people who are working the tax break they need to help us move this economy forward. And with that, I turn it over to my Vice Chair, Javier Becerra.
Mr. Chairman, amen. I agree with everything you've just said. That's the focus of what Congress should be doing, is jobs. And while on November the 21st, those of us who served on the super committee were very disappointed, the world did not end on November 21st. And fortunately, Americans still picked up, went to work, celebrated Thanksgiving, did some pretty decent shopping, and they proved that America's still working. But unfortunately for too many Americans, as the chairman just pointed out, that's not the case. And so if we could, in Congress, do what the president has been doing now for months, saying that job one is helping the private sector create jobs, we'd have a lot more Americans ready to help lift this economy. And so we pick up the pieces from the super committee and we try to move forward. And if we're smart, we'll finally have Congress focus on a jobs agenda. It's interesting. Even though the missed opportunity was great with the super committee, we're still going to see deficit savings, $1.2 trillion, if nothing else is done. Hopefully some more will be done. What's not in the mix is the job creation that Democrats pursued throughout the entire life of the super committee. We wished our Republican colleagues would have joined us in the effort to include jobs in any package of deficit reduction. But regardless of that and the failure of the super committee to come up with a jobs creation package, we can now get back to work and we can focus on jobs. And so I hope that after 330 days in the House of Representatives, that the Republican leadership will finally be prepared to present a job creation bill to join the president and get this economy moving and get Americans back to work. We do that, and guess what? There will not have been a failure of the super committee because we will have done our work, whether through a super committee or the regular process in the Congress of the United States.
Thanks, Javier. Take a couple of questions before we go to caucus. Go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. Larson, Mr. Becerra. You know, a lot has been made about unwinding the trigger. I know there's been an effort from some Republicans in the Senate to kind of get rid of the automatic cuts that would come on the defense side. And then right before the holiday, a Democrat in the House said he wanted to do the same thing for the Medicare cuts. I was wondering, is there any support to kind of rally around that and try to unwind the 2% automatic cuts on the Medicare side?
Well, I think that there is a natural movement, obviously, that would look to that, but we also have the president saying that a deal is a deal. And we had John Boehner saying a deal is a deal. And that they think that sequestration should go forward. Now, I think as people begin to look at the, as you said, I think the term was, as this begins to unravel, or as the super committee's unraveling, and the goal that was based on an objective of something that was big, bold, and balanced turns out not to be there, thinking can change, and probably will. And people will certainly resort to protecting their interests, but I don't see any one diverting from the goal of trying to come up with the savings that can be achieved, and indeed the committee did an awful lot of good work there, all of which, by the way, we think can be achieved through job creation. In fact, would exceed what the expectation would be. So we do think that there are remedies. How people are going to coalesce, well, I think a lot will happen over the next several weeks. You've all written about and talked about the fencing off of the defense industry and what's going to happen to not-for-profits and what's going to happen in effect to the committee did an excellent job of making sure that important issues like Medicaid and veterans and Medicare and Social Security were all protected within the within that. But that still leaves a downward pressure on a number of people who are the least amongst us, and that will certainly garner more than passing interest from Democrats, and I dare say Republicans too.
I'll just add that the super committee was nothing more, nothing less than a way to come up with a smarter package of deficit reduction than the automatic triggers. That's all it was. Our job was simply to come up with a substitute for what would take place automatically. And that was where the missed opportunity occurred, because it's always better to have a human hand on very tough decisions about cuts to services to Americans, especially when they've paid for them, and making decisions on how we're going to tax the American public. That doesn't end the opportunity to do a smarter package of deficit reduction simply because the super committee's authority has ended. That still continues. But smarter means balanced. It doesn't mean protect one special interest at the expense of the rest of America, including, of course, the middle class. And so can we do a smarter package to get to $1.2 trillion in saving? Absolutely. Nothing stops us from doing that. Nothing ever stopped Congress from doing that, even while the super committee was functioning. I would hope, though, that people would understand you just can't have candy. You got to eat the vegetables at some point. You said you wanted this. You said you you ran on saying you were for reducing deficits. Shame on you if all of a sudden now you're saying you don't like the medicine you prescribed and now you're trying to weasel out of it. We have a job to do, as the chairman said, the president said, let's do our work. We can make this a smarter package without weaseling out of making this a balanced approach to deficit reduction and job creation.
I also think you'll see Democrats, and this is a related issue, but I think you'll see Democrats also over these next several weeks stepping up the interest for reform, especially in the areas of campaign finance. And a focus on this area as we see this, as we gear up for presidential races that could be in the billions, that we look at while the House was successful in passing the Disclose Act, that it died on the Senate calendar. And also as we look at campaign finance reform, I'm proud to be a co-sponsor with Walter Jones of an initiative that Dick DeBourbon is sponsoring in the Senate as well. But clearly we continue to believe that this whole system is in a wash of money and needs reform. I think the public is increasingly wising up to that. I think you're going to see several proposals emanating from our committees and from Democratic leaders in our caucus. And with that, we have a caucus and look forward to going back. Yes, we'll take one.
Yeah, okay. Before recess, Congress passed the minibus appropriations bill with heavy Democratic support to get it over the finish line. Does that give you guys leverage on sort of the omnibus that has to come up by December 16th and tax extenders, UI, AMT, doc fix, things like that?
Well, it's hard to say what kind of leverage that we have in the minority when the majority holds all the cards, controls the calendar, and is able to do it. But you would think, given the common sense practicality of those issues, and clearly the letter that was sent by over the interim by our leaders, Nancy Pelosi, Steny Hoyer, and Jim Clyburn, underscores that what you have pointed out in terms of what we hope is a clean CR that addresses the current needs that you succinctly laid out for us.
I just add that people always forget this. A minority cannot defeat a bill. Only a majority can defeat a bill. And so if the majority, the Republican majority, can't do its work and get a bill done, and they need to seek out support for a bipartisan solution, then they should expect that the minority will have an opportunity to participate in the crafting of that solution. And so I think Democrats have always been prepared to work with our Republican colleagues to come up with a bipartisan solution. Too often in the House that hasn't happened, and too often what the Republican leadership in the House has found is that they fail to get the votes they need to pass a Republican, a heavily Republican-driven bill, especially on very important matters like budget. So we hope that the House will do its work. Americans are looking at us, wondering if we'll do our job because they're doing theirs. And so I hope that what we find is that we can pass a bipartisan bill on something as important as our budget, the way it was done at least earlier on the CR. But we'll wait to see.
Thank you all.